the first civilization on the face of the earth. History began in Mesopotamia with the Sumerians. I will explain to you one thing, that history begins with writing, and not that there were other civilizations. No, history begins with writing. In this clip, I explain to you the history of the Sumerians in a brief and clear manner. So I ask you to put a like and participate in it. The channel, and in the name of God, with God's blessing, we begin thousands of years before this day. The children of Adam somehow arrived in Africa. They spread from there to all parts of the world, and the groups that spread everywhere developed their customs and traditions differently from other human groups because of geography and other things as well, especially 8 to 10,000 years ago, and the availability of more sources of food for the sons of Adam. People began to multiply very quickly, and with the transition to the Neolithic age. Those who began to cultivate envied that without people, they would have more time to develop. Instead of men going out to hunt, they would cultivate and continue. They discover new things and become envious. As the people of Mesopotamia began to cultivate agriculture, they also began to move to settled life and began to establish cities. Thus, the oldest civilization in history was founded, which was founded between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which extended to the Arabian Gulf. This civilization is the Sumerian civilization, and agriculture in these lands was not easy, because these areas were made up of marshes, or the swamps, and summer, of course, were very hot in Iraq, and every place was desert except the banks of the rivers. The Sumerians were forced to form and organize themselves into groups around the day, so of course they could complete their lineage and leave a healthy area for their children. Human beings needed each other, and the necessity of cooperation among each other caused a change in the mentality of a group. These are people who, a short time ago, lived in caves and hunted animals, and people did not begin to cultivate agriculture. They began to live in houses, and they began to tame animals, and they began to be able to eat in a way that developed them further, and they began to make pottery and began to practice other arts. And with the increase in products such as pottery and textiles, this caused the beginning of trade in the form of exchange for the first time, and also in the same period. These religious beliefs also developed and changed a lot. Between 5,500 and 5000 BC, the Sumerians began to establish the first large cities, and the features of civilization began to become clearer in Mesopotamia. But the Sumerians were not the founders of civilization itself from scratch, because they came from the land, and there was a second group of the indigenous inhabitants of the region, and the Sumerians came and were influenced by them and developed further. And this civilization developed, and it is not known who these inhabitants were, and no one reached them because of their real name, but because their remains were found in Tel al-Ubaid. Their period was called the Ubaid period and the Ubaid people. These people were not very developed, but they cultivated and harvested. They were the founders of the infrastructure of the Sumerians. And the Sumerians migrated to Yemen in about 4000 BC. There are many theories about the origin of the Sumerians. Some say they were from Shem and migrated from the deserts west of Mesopotamia, and some say they were from Japheth. With Noah and that, they immigrated from Central Asia, and in what says that they are also from Japheth with mourning, and they migrated from the north, meaning from Anatolia and the Caucasus. But whatever their exact origin, the coming of the Sumerians to the region developed the region very significantly, and also at the same time caused the development of the sons of Adam. And cities such as Kish-Nipers were established. These cities, along with trade and agriculture, developed very greatly, and these cities were called Ur-Haji. From this, and from here, the English word Seti appeared. And if we consider the possibility that the Sumerians came from Japheth with Noah, then they are relatives. The Germans, so it is possible that the word city was common among them, or that the Germanic peoples took this word from the Sumerian language. And these small cities were transformed into states, meaning every city had a king and was managed as if it were a state on its own. But in the end, they all remained Sumerians. And the city that developed the most in that era was Uruk. And for this reason, the reason is that historians mention that period as a period, specifically around the year 3200 BC, for the rulers of the cities to facilitate trade on people. And in order to increase transactions, they invented something new. And this invention was the cuneiform book. The Sumerians, who also discovered writing, were among the discoverers of official communication between countries or between companies, which at that time were the temples in which people's money was stored, and people's money in that period, their agricultural crops meant everything.